right, we are ready for the bonus session, sponsored by and featuring the inventor of the Platypod and the Platyball ball head, Dr. Larry T. And a lot of people know Dr. T for this great photography gear. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about that tonight, but there's so much more to the presentation. Dr. T, thank you so much for tailoring the presentation in each of these conferences to the content of the conference. And tonight, we're going to talk about we're going to have a few announcements and then a slideshow presentation that I think a lot of you are going to love. And then right after that, we're going to talk about the Kickstarter for photography. And that, I think, I've been telling people about that today. I think that's going to be very intriguing for people. Plus, just like all the other classes, you can ask Q&A during this presentation. So beside our video window, there's that one where it says chat and the other one that says Q&A. If you ask questions in the Q&A, I'm going to be watching those so that as we start to wrap everything up, Dr. T can be asked some of these questions. So get ready, you'll be able to ask all kinds of questions. And without any further ado, the inventor of the Platypod and the Platyball and your trainer for tonight's presentation, Dr. Larry T.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you to all you wonderful people who are out there watching this KelbyOne conference on making money with your photography. Well, this is going to be, again, a different kind of talk. Last time we were at the gear conference, and it was all very hardware-oriented. This time is going to be a little bit different, and I think Larry mentioned we have a great slideshow to show you with all new materials. And sit back, relax, munch on your dinner, and I hope you enjoy. First, a few little announcements to get out of the way for you Platypod lovers out there. And I just wanted you to know, first of all, the Platypod Elite and Ergo, revolutionary tripod ball head with no knobs, just buttons, upside down design. Go over to platypod.com, learn all about the Platyball. We have revolutionized the ball head. These are now available for immediate shipping. Just place your order before 12 o'clock Eastern, and you can have it shipped out the same day on weekdays. Then, Platypod Extreme. So we've taken the old Platypod Max, we've revolutionized that, and we launched Platypod Extreme on Kickstarter about 2 months ago. Kickstarter was over, I think, May 9th. We have already shipped the Platypod Extreme to the first 2 tiers of Kickstarter backers. And I'm very proud to say we are way ahead of schedule on this. We anticipate sending the new Platypod Extreme out to the remainder of the Kickstarter backers somewhere over the next few weeks. We're just waiting for a shipment to come in any day now. And we're really super excited about this. We've also taken a bunch of pre-orders. They are available on our website for pre-order. There are a limited number coming in for shipment in late July and early August. So please look at our website for that as well. And we have 2 new products available. One has been available for a little while in our Platypod Multi-Accessory Kit, and that's the Platypod Disc. Very useful, serves 3 functions. One, it's a riser that goes on a Platypod Ultra or Extreme that'll give you an extra ½ an inch of height on there. But it also will convert our 3/8 inch bolt to a 1/4 inch bolt. And if you don't know what that stuff is about, I refer you back to the gear conference where we went over that in a lot of detail. And that's available both on KelbyOne if you signed up for the conference, and it's also available on YouTube on our channel. Just go to YouTube, look up the Platypod channel, and you'll find a whole discussion there. And the last little function here is if you do want to level your Platypod, it's got a little bubble level on there. You can screw it onto the Platypod and use it there. And one more super function, and this is probably the main one, and that is this is now a quick release plate, which you can put on any camera with a 1/4 inch socket, which is pretty much just about every camera, and then put it onto any ARC compatible clamp, including the one on our Platyball. Very, very useful tool. So now that's available for individual purchase. You can go to our website and you can find that. Last but not least, little announcement. We mentioned this on the gear conference last time, is we have the Platypod Elbow. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. This is a super useful tool where with one simple lever, you can adjust 3 different joints on this. Okay, the middle one here that's ratcheted, the top one here, and the bottom. And how do you use this? Well, I'll show you. You can put this on your platypod, any platypod, including the new Extreme. And in addition to having, let's say, your ball head here, a camera on here, you can now attach a secondary camera, perhaps for video. You can attach lighting equipment. What's special about this over and above our platypod goosenecks, which is that, is the goosenecks can handle up to about 24 ounces. This elbow can now handle up to 6 pounds. So this is ideal for those of you shooting video, want to use something like an Atomos Ninja, which is a HDMI recorder and a screen to view your images with. And super, super useful. And you can just position this any way you want. And attaching a device is so simple because it's got this little thumb wheel at the top. Let me kind of reposition that so you can see, so that I can easily just turn that and put a device on and off. So really nice tool here. And yes, don't forget those goosenecks, super handy for holding clamps. And we have a platypod clamp that'll go on there. So if you want to put on a mirror or reflector. So there's all the advertisement stuff for now, because this is, again, a conference about making money with your photography, and these devices and your purchase and support are how we make some money. So appreciate your indulgence and listening to that. Enough advertising. Let's get into the meat of this discussion. Larry, any questions or comments?
No, what I want to point out is Dr. T quickly ran through a lot of this, and some of this, a lot of us have been exposed to for quite some time, so we know what the platyball is. And when Dr. T said it's an upside down ball head, and we know what an arca plate is, and this one, the round arca plate, is revolutionary. If any of this stuff in any way what made you go, what's that? How do I use that? There's all kinds of great stuff over on platypod.com that's informational about it. You'll see all kinds of different pictures of the different tools, and you'll also see a whole lot of videos that show each of these pieces of equipment in use. Maybe it's part of a kit or something like that, but all of the pieces of gear that Dr. T showed tonight are understandable through the platypod.com comprehensive website and all the listings that you have there. So sorry for taking us a little bit off track there, and I know we want to jump into the slideshow.
Well, and thank you for mentioning all that, Larry. And also, we will be offering some promo codes to help you along with your purchases. And certainly, if you do have questions, we can be contacted via service@platypod.com. Just go to the website, click on Contact Us, and we'll get your messages. We try to respond pretty quickly to those. Let's dive in. Okay. Again, welcome to everybody just joining us now at the Making Money with Your Photography conference here at KelbyOne. So I think a key message that I want to impart is to set yourself apart from other photographers and to brand your work and make yourself special. You need to think differently. You need to shoot differently. And I hope you'll get a message that Platypod can actually help you do that. For example, here Bob Coates, Arizona photographer. Bob's specialty is, I think, like Rick Salmon also says, his specialty is not specializing. He makes himself available to his clients to basically fulfill any needs they may have. Well, one of Bob's own needs is to run workshops, and he makes some income doing that in the Sedona area. He'll go out into the desert and set his camera down, and here he's showing how to do Milky Way photography. This is a whole separate subject altogether. We'll hear Bob just to briefly set down his Olympus camera with a 7 to 14 millimeter wide angle lens, and he shot 2 images. The image of the Milky Way was shot at f2.8 at ISO 8000 for 8 seconds. Now, if you're under 13 seconds, you'll avoid stars streaking in the sky. But again, this is a much more detailed subject for another time. But what Bob did differently here is he wanted to bring in these big boulders in the foreground. And to enable him to do that, he needed a very low profile for the camera. So he set down his Platypod Extreme and his Platyball to position everything. One other thing you'll notice in this image is you can't really tell where the horizon is. So if you want to go and have everything lining up beautifully, you need a good level. Well, you're not going to see a bubble level very well at this time of the night. So he used his Platyball Elite with its built-in LED leveling indicator to help him set up for this shot. The foreground was shot at a different exposure, and that was at about 40 seconds. And that he then imported the 2 images into Photoshop, blended them in Photoshop, and he got this beautiful image, which he published recently at Photo Focus, which is a website through which there's a lot of teaching, and there's a daily email sent out where photographers are teaching their technique. So head over there, photofocus.com, if you want to take a look at the full article. So Bob does make himself special with his special photography, and as you can see, his workshops will sell out because he has such a broad range of capability that he can teach with. Mitchell Wu. This is an image we've not previously shown at the KelbyOne conferences, where Barbie is driving this truck in a rather erratic fashion, a little bit comical here. And what Mitchell likes to introduce into his photography is, aside from this perspective that he's showing here, this low angle perspective, making everything a little bit more lifelike, is to introduce environmental elements. He'll do this with water, with fire, with little sparklers, basically small explosions. And here what he has done is he's blasted some gravel behind the truck, gravel and dirt, using a plumber's tool, an air blaster, and kicks up the dust behind here, giving his images an extra special flavor. And Mitchell is making a very nice income through companies such as Disney, Hasbro, Mattel, and others to promote his work and make a living from that. But what sets him apart is that he is doing something a little different. Shamira Young, who is a fine art photographer out of the Detroit area. Shamira is showing how she'll make this forest look a little different, A, by shooting from a very low angle, and B, combining it with some watercolor work to produce this beautiful image. What does she do with these images? Well, she licenses them out through a website, which you can look this up, Artists to Watch, I believe it's artiststowatch.com, which will then take your images and make them into greeting cards and other objects which people can purchase. And the arrangement with them is each time there's a purchase, you bring in income, and this is how Shamira is making a living now with her fine art photography. There's other ways to do this too, as we'll show soon. Jim Doyle. I'm going to talk a minute about Jim Doyle. Not very well known in the teaching realm, although he does teach at a community college in his area, the Rancho Santiago College in the city of Orange, California. Jim has a company called APGS, Applied Photographers, with offices throughout the country. Jim's company gets paid out thousands of dollars a day for their expert work. They're the ones you call when you want to produce an annual report or when you've built a big project with hundreds of homes and want to put out a brochure with outstanding photography. Jim is exacting in his technique. And one of the things we're showing here, Jim is now regularly using the Platypod Elite to line up his shots and get his verticals vertical and his horizontals horizontal, so as to have to use minimal to no adjustments on this in Lightroom or Photoshop. And the Platypod Extreme served him as a good tool to be able to place the camera exactly where it was needed on this countertop. Sometimes Jim has to place the camera way against a wall, a foot or two further in from where a tripod would go. And that makes all the difference in the width of the shot that he can get, even with a super wide lens. And you can see the final image that he has. Now, I want to bring to your attention the perfection in this photo, the symmetry. These chairs are perfectly placed. The scene is cleaned up perfectly. The settings in the foreground are perfectly set up. If you go to Jim's site, and it's listed at the top of this page, if you want to take a screenshot or a photo, apgs.net, not .com, it's .net. I would encourage you, if you're at all interested in doing real estate photography, and that's a great source of income these days, go to APGS, study Jim's work. Look at how he sets up the shot. Look at the lighting. Look at how he brings in the outdoors in many of the shots. You can't see it so much over here, but in many of his images, you'll see the outdoors perfectly exposed, the indoors perfectly exposed. That doesn't just happen through a single image. Go online, learn techniques to do this. There's something called the Flambean Technique, where you use a combination of flash and ambient light to bring all that in. Study these photographers, and I think you'll learn a lot. And again, honing in on your skills will make better sample photos, better portfolios for you to be able to promote your work. Larry, any comments up to now?
I just am taken aback by his positioning and the symmetry that you've already referred to. But one of the main things is I did go to apgs.net and I was blown away by all of the examples that he has there. There are fantastic examples of how to set up and shoot wonderful finished images for architectural photography. And obviously these architectural images are staged. He's got, a professional company coming in and putting in the tables, the chairs, the pillows, the art on the walls. The other thing that I like is that he's got the camera in a position to be able to not only capture all of that and have an appropriate deep depth of field so you don't have portions of the image blurred, but he's also got no lens distortion. So I would think to get something like this, you probably would need something like a wider angle lens, but in fact, the way that his finished images turn out, the tables aren't bent or warped, you don't get any of the fisheye effect, yet you still have a good view edge to edge, top and bottom, left and right. So a very good set of examples to follow on apgs.net, and a wonderful, it almost kind of sets the goal for you if you're thinking about getting into architectural photography.
Thank you, Larry. And I'll point out, apropos to your comments there, to achieve that with a wide-angle lens, you've got to be lined up perfectly. Once you go off horizontal, vertical, you're going to get all kinds of trapezoidal shapes and things like that. If you look at the Platypod there, you will notice that there's 4 green lights in the center of that dark screen there. That's the LED leveling indicator. And that's showing you to within half a degree that the image is lined up just right. And again, little advertorial here. Head over to my website at platypod.com, and you can learn more about the Platypod, an outstanding tool for this. Well, I think some of you have heard of Scott Kelby, and Scott has provided these images. This is from the Sephardic temple in Prague. And Scott just wanted to get the right perspective, and the place to get that from was right on this countertop that he found, and angled his camera back, just using a Platypod Elite. I'm sorry, excuse me, a Platypod Ultra. That's our smaller Platypod plate, and was able to get this amazing image. And again, this is very different from someone just holding a camera at eye level, taking a straightforward shot. What makes Scott special is that Scott will individualize, develop a style, as you see here also in this library from his recent trip to Prague. And having the camera on a steady surface, I don't care how steady you hope and think that you can hold your camera, having a camera on a stable platform gives you a sharper image. Try it without. I also think I can hold a camera steady, but having it on a tripod or on a platypod in this case is great. And when you're traveling, the other point here is, hey, you can take a platypod into these two places. They didn't allow tripods, and I believe Scott said on his trip to Prague, almost no interior place that he went to allowed tripods, but nobody shooed him away for platypods.
Actually had to have people wait outside the venue holding tripods. They wouldn't even let them go inside, much less use them.
So we're talking about fine art before, and there's a different path. Instead of licensing, if your fine art is really good, like that of Lizzie Gadd, if you haven't met Lizzie, she appeared together with me in early April on The Grid, and I would encourage you, if you haven't seen that episode, go back and take a look at it. Not so much because we launched our Kickstarter on that episode, but Lizzie and her friend Chris Andrus are showing their photography. I believe Scott was almost blown off his chair by these images. They were so amazing. But talking about business a little bit here, Lizzie has this style of doing self-portraiture landscape work, and she'll set down a tripod, or in this case, a platypod, on the surface here, right on the ice, and then walk out into the scene with the camera firing off on an intervalometer, one image every 2 seconds until she gets the shot that she wants. She'll put on a lovely dress to contrast or match with the scene. Lizzie struggled for a while trying to get her images out, but what she did in the meantime was built up a very, very strong following on social media, especially on Instagram. If you look up Elizabeth Gadd on Instagram, you'll find she has almost 175,000 followers. So what Lizzie did was one day she decided to make a sale. She has a website set up. I'm not sure if it's Squarespace or SmugMug, but one of those websites. She has all her fine art. She takes her orders and sends them out to a photography lab in Europe, which is what she happens to like. They're printing the papers they use. But one day she decided she was going to make a sell for half price, 50% off, on a 48-hour special, and launched it on Instagram and via an email list that she had of her fans. And in 48 hours was able to sell over $40,000 worth of images. You've got to know your marketing. You've got to develop a following. You've got to develop a special style, special images, and then you can do this if you're good enough to do it. Larry, any comments on that?
I just can't get over how much she sold. Now, I'm a fan of her work. You introduced me to her a year ago or so, and I just couldn't get over how she is taking pictures of herself. You're calling these self-portraits. What's interesting to me is you couldn't tell that person. I mean, if I saw her in a crowd, at a restaurant, I'd never be able to pick her out. Yes, there's a person in the image, and yes, the person is the featured image, the featured person or the featured art element in these images, but she's also not personally identifiable. So to me, that's kind of an interesting twist on the concept of self-portrait. The other thing is, she doesn't have to stand behind the camera and direct the model. She is the photographer and the model. I think that should be inspiration to people who are thinking, how can I make money in photography? This is another twist. This is a really interesting way to get into photography, into fine art photography, and have a model there. And I guarantee you, every single time you go out as a photographer, if you're the photographer and the model will always be there. I mean, what an interesting twist, but a fantastic success story too. You said she made $40,000 in a single event?
That in a 2-day period, in a 2-day sale. So,
that's amazing.
And I think since then, her images have been doing just beautifully. Now, these show from $150, but it depends what size. The larger sizes, some of her images can be $1,500.
Wow.
And people are buying them. I'll throw out some ideas for people who want to do something like this. If you have a talent with juggling, with acrobatics, with light painting, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look up light painting. With all kinds of different devices, you can make your own style. You don't have to exactly copy something like this, but you can make images that are special for fine art. And if you promote yourself well and you're good with social media, you can strike it big, just like Lizzie did.
Yeah, I think people need to be aware that they should take advantage of the timer, the intervalometer on their camera.
Agreed. And there's a right tool for each job, and the trick is to pick out and know what you need and how to use it. And hopefully that's where we come into to some degree too. Michelle Celentano, portrait artist in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And one thing, if you're doing kids sometimes get impatient. Now, these are older children. If you're dealing with toddlers, you got very, very few seconds to work with. Michelle is using regular tripods, but she likes to use the Platypod and has told me that she's now using her Platypod exclusively because it's so fast to operate. And once you set it up, you can just push your camera left and right. You can hold the camera with the Platypod all in one hand and make your adjustments. So she's found this to be a tool which has really helped. And if you look at the quote, Platypod has been on my tripod every single day since I got it. It's never been taken off. And this is a really nice setup, by the way. I love clamshell photography, where you use a light overhead like you see here and a curved eye light reflector underneath. I think it just gives a great image and nice colors on the iris. And you can see another view of how Michelle has got this set up. Michelle's actually written books. That's another thing, we can talk about it a little bit, is writing books on photography, teaching her techniques for family portraiture. And she lectures on the subject too. Getting out on the lecture circuit, by the way, is also a great way to build your name. Publishing a book is a great way to get your name out there. And all of a sudden, you're the expert in that field that everybody wants to hire. Skip Dickstein started out just, taking pictures at thoroughbred racing events, and eventually developed a clientele by doing special shots, which other people weren't necessarily doing. Here he's doing a remote shot on a Platypod Extreme right at the edge of the track. And for those who don't know this was shot at the recent Preakness race, where early voting, the horse in this image, won by 2.5 lengths. So Skip is shooting for equine magazines and is very successful at this. But along the lines of what we said before, he has to be somewhat of a jack of all trades, because that won't pay all of his bills. So he is working with commercial photography, industrial photography, editorial, other sports, as well as his thoroughbred racing. And one sure thing to have in your back pocket, if you can do it well, is event photography, weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, confirmation. There's all kinds of things that you can do to keep your work going. And I would encourage anyone who wants to get into wedding photography and is afraid to take that leap to have to do all the advertising and meeting with the brides and grooms yourself, is put yourself up to wedding photographers, number one, to act as their assistants for lighting. And then eventually, before you know it, you get handed a camera. You can use your own camera and be a second shooter. Maybe shoot a little bit of a photojournalist style while the wedding photographer's shooting classic style, and build up. These wedding photographers who are second shooters are making between $1,000 and $2,000 a shoot. And at the end of the wedding, all you do is you take your chip, you hand it to the main photographer, and you go home. And that's it. And you get cut a check for that kind of work. So really consider that, especially if you're a little queasy about diving right into wedding photography by yourself. Really good way to break into that field. Any comments on that, Larry?
I was just going to agree with you because I watched Scott Kelby's opening class yesterday, his pre-conference class, and he even talked about the benefits of being a second shooter. And a lot of people think, oh, I want to jump right into wedding photography, and then they realize how overwhelming it is and how much responsibility you have. There's no way that they're going to, oh, we got to do the vows again because you messed up on the shoot. That's not going to happen. So being a second shooter is a great place to be, and then maybe you're just responsible for some of the candid shots of the guests in the wedding or at the wedding reception, something like that. The second shooter role is very valuable as you're getting into event and wedding photography like that.
Absolutely. I agree with your comments completely. All right. Over to Dave Williams. As many of you know, Dave writes the Tuesday blog for Scott Kelby on the Scott Kelby blog. Dave is out in the United Kingdom and traveling all over Europe and Norway. Well, Dave shot this beautiful image in the wee hours of the morning, and look how special this looked, the little ripples around the tree. Well, that didn't just happen by itself. When Dave got there before sunrise, there were a whole bunch of other photographers there. Everybody set up on the tripod with the same kind of image, and they all probably walked away with exactly the same image. So Dave did two things. Number one, he wanted to go lower angle to catch a little bit more foreground, a little bit lower angle on the water. And then after all the photographers were done shooting, he says to them, hey, you guys done? One guy says, no, let me take one more picture. That fellow took a picture. And Dave goes, okay, you done now? Yep, we're all done. And he takes a rock and throws it into the water and walks away with the most unique shot of the day. Again, differentiating himself from other photographers, branding himself. And this is why Dave is invited to speak at events. He's making his money there, getting licensed to shoot special images, and certainly doing some teaching and writing. And now his podcast, which is the Epic Photography Podcast, which I encourage many of you to go sign up for on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. Very, very interesting show that's produced weekly. This is my friend Andrew Scravani. Andrew's a New York Times photographer, and we've shown some of Andrew's work in the past. And I'm just showing here how Andrew, first of all, has a certain style where you just want to go over, either lick or take a bite out of whatever he's shooting, in this case, some honey. Andrew was just recently invited to Sicily to do a set of classes for the iPhone photography school. And Andrew uses his Platypod to set his camera right on the table, get in close and personal with the food that he's shooting. And he's teaching how you can do this just with an iPod. I encourage you all to go over either to Amazon, or I believe soon that B&H may have this book called That Photo Makes Me Hungry by Andrew Scravani. The images in here alone are worth the price of $20, $25 for this book. And certainly Andrew describes his experiences, his style, his techniques for getting the type of images that he's doing here. Many of them just with simple ambient daylight. And you should really look and learn from what Andrew is doing. We hope to hear a lot more from Andrew in the future. Samantha Kennedy, not yet making a lot of money with her photography, but I think she's on the path. We actually hired her to do this image as a splash screen for the grid. When you go there, that's our advertisement on the grid. And why did I invite Samantha to do this? Well, because I consider Samantha to be the queen of the sunrise. Because Samantha can shoot a sunrise better than almost anybody that I know. She's out in Long Island. She gets these beautiful images, sometimes with these calm waters, glassine waters, and the colors and the contrast here are amazing. Just look at this landscape image that she did, this beautiful bridge. I have this image in the past. And Samantha is one of our biggest fans. Using Platypod, but using it just beautifully. And I think Samantha will be able to write a book on how to shoot sunrises, because I think she has a amount to teach. I'm trying to encourage her to do this maybe on Kickstarter. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, because I think it would be a great way for her to promote herself. So put out special images. Eventually someone will notice you, and you may get invited to do work for pay. Levi Sim has a whole different angle that I'll talk about on earning a living in photography. Well, Levi's always been shooting things a little bit differently. He's made himself very well known, again, through the Photo Focus group, that's photofocus.com, by doing a lot of teaching on their website and through their daily email newsletters. But Levi was having a hard time getting a consistent income going. And finally, he put himself out there, having a beautiful portfolio, put himself out there to be hired for a constant job. And he is now the university photographer at the University of Utah. Here you can see how Levi's taking advantage of this snowy weather to get these beautiful images. Both of the same object, one close up with the tower in the university building. I think this is an administrative building. And also this broad wide angle shot of the campus. But more importantly, Levi has made himself known and popular through teaching and through producing images which are different. And I think that helped him land this job. And he's very happy now shooting university events, photographs for their brochures, and doing headshots, sport shots, and very happy at it too. You all know Moose Peterson. I just thought I'd throw in this wonderful Moose Peterson shot of a sage lily shot from super low angle using a platypod and a platyball. And Moose has told me that he loves our equipment because, again, it gets him into positions where tripods either won't do, or you got to spend a long time flipping your tripod under, upside down. Well, Moose has been around for quite a bit and has made a wonderful name for himself through mostly through wildlife photography, through aviation photography, and you can consider that fine art work also. And his images sell, and his books sell very well, and he's set himself above and beyond so many other photographers through his style. Don Komarechka, and I brought this up several times. If you're at all interested in close-up and macro photography, Don's book is slowly running out of print, so I would try to pick one copy up or more. B&H has these, Macro Photography, the Universe at Our Feet, and Don is showing through his work here how he can get water droplet photography using this super complex setup. It looks like an octopus. Larry, what do you think of that?
It's so inspiring, yet discouraging, because every time I try, I don't get the results that Don does. He's an amazing artist, And just the concept of using a droplet of water as a lens within your image. Incredible. And then he's got that amazing setup at the bottom right, you see, inset, that allowed him to be able to take the shot to begin with. He's just got a gift. He's been doing macro so long and so well that he's got an artistic insight. And I think that people that are even thinking about doing macro photography benefit from looking at an artist like this and getting inspired and trying to mimic, and then come up with your own versions as well, but trying to mimic the art that Don is able to create. Just amazing.
Now, again, we'll talk about this in a moment, about Kickstarter. This book was promoted first on Kickstarter, sold 2,500 copies on Kickstarter, and raised over $140,000. So we'll talk about Kickstarter in a second. And in fact, Rick Salmon, his new book, How to Make Money While You're Sleeping. Well, if you're interested in this conference, buy this book. It's great. And I'm very proud to say I have a few pages that I wrote for his book on my Kickstarter experience, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I just threw in this little photo of a cardinal that Rick shot, I believe, in his backyard for I'm not sure where it was taken, but using the Platypod. But that's just sort of as a segue to the next section. All right. And please, when you go to the website, it'll prompt you to sign up for our newsletter. Next newsletter is coming out this Friday. We get 3 wonderful articles every month in the newsletter. They'll teach you about different things that you can do with your Platypod, and they come from star photographers throughout the world. I think you'll enjoy it. If you don't, you can opt out. I won't yell at anybody. And also, those newsletters will sometimes have some special deals of their own. Only once a month. We won't bother you a whole lot. And please sign up for that on our website. But do this today, because when the email gets sent out on Friday, it's a one-time thing. Otherwise, you won't see another newsletter until the following month. It's only available to those who signed up on our mailing list.
And Dr. T, can I mention, I'm one of those people who, for a number of years, I was signing up for, the frequent buyer club, whether it's Target or Walgreens or whatever. And then I just got so fed up with all that stuff because the amount of savings was a little and the annoyance was a lot. And that happens a lot online. When you go somewhere, you go to a website and you sign up for something. Well, it's the opposite when you go to the Platypod website. You sign up for this and you get a monthly newsletter. And by that I mean you get a monthly newsletter. You don't get inundated every 2 days with, hurry up, there's this special, that special. Now, you will occasionally get an email about a special thing that is a special thing in the Platypod environment. But for the most part, almost all you're going to get is a news-packed newsletter with lots of good help and information. So, Dr. T, thank you for being consistent with how that information is getting out to the people that are subscribers.
Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you for echoing and making those comments. Why don't you introduce the next section of this talk, and we'll proceed.
Yeah, this is what I've been telling people about all day, and I've been saying Dr. T and I are going to talk tonight, and we're going to talk about a little bit about Platypod gear. You're going to see some inspiring things, and I've been inspired by some of the examples of people making successful livings doing different kinds of photography. So you've seen some of that through the slideshow, and then you've also seen some really kind of cool gear that made it all possible. But I mentioned today several times that Dr. T has funded a lot of the product development of the Platypod, the original Platypod, then each of the iterations of the Platypod, and also the Platyball. All those have gone through Kickstarter. And when you hear about Kickstarter, you think, okay, well, this is a crowdfunding tool. How does it work? Is it legit? How do people really use it? Are there best practices? And so Dr. T is here to help us understand Kickstarter from his experience, but then also you don't have to be coming up with an invention. Maybe your thing is something else. Maybe it's like a book, because I think Don Komarechka did his book on Kickstarter, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
there are a lot of opportunities like that with Kickstarter. So Dr. T, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and turn this into almost an interview and ask you, how did you get started in Kickstarter and what were some of your first steps there?
Well, the story's a simple one, actually. It started with a hike that my wife and I took in Bryce Canyon, going down 1,000 feet into the Navajo Trail. And I took along a tripod with me, a travel tripod, together with the head. It weighed about 5 or 6 pounds. That was great going down, and we got some wonderful shots and kind of selfies where we would shoot from 30 feet away with a slight telephoto lens, and got just beautiful, some beautiful self-portraits and beautiful images all together. And then came the trip back up, which was not easy, hiking up 1,000 feet. Little did I know I had a little bit of a heart condition at the time, and I ended up having to see the cardiologist after I came home from that trip. When I got home, I said, you know what, there's got to be a better way. I wish I had a portable tripod that hardly took up any space. I had one of those twisty bendy tripods, but it would take up the space of my telephoto lens. And that just wasn't acceptable, because you know every square or cubic inch in your tripod bag is super valuable. I looked for a solution and I couldn't find it. Nobody was making a flat tripod. So one night, I wake up early in the morning and I came up with this idea to take a plate of metal, in this case aluminum, put a bolt through it. In this case, actually, I had originally 2 bolts, and we produced a product together with a friend of mine in the metals business called the Platypod Pro. So this was the very, very first Platypod, rather simple. It had a few screw holes in here so that you could mount some little spikes in it in case you were on rock or concrete, and some extra holes in case you wanted to screw it into a wall. And we showed this off the very first time, Larry, you'll probably remember, 2015 at Photoshop World.
Yeah.
So my wife and I and 2 of our kids came out and we set up a booth, and 90 people bought this wonderful little object from us. And I said, I think we're onto something over here. We promoted it at that time through photography magazines, of which there's hardly any left today, and some word of mouth, and it built up. As we were going along, we were taking a lot of suggestions. People wanted a larger one. They wanted a way to strap it on to objects. And we came up next with the idea for a larger plate. Now, the original Platypod Pro was the size of a iPhone 4 back then. Okay, this was the size of an iPad mini. This time, to do this right, I needed to produce it in a certain volume, because we really didn't make hardly anything on this. We needed to go for a certain volume to be able to get some income from this. So I turned to Kickstarter. And Kickstarter, for those of you who don't know, is a way of promoting an idea, a project, a product, a book perhaps, a game, where you're asking the crowd to fund your project, hence crowdfunding. And what do they get from it? Well, they get a promise that you're going to try to deliver them an excellent product, perhaps at a discount, perhaps earlier than the general public will get it. There's no guarantees on Kickstarter. It is a risk, but it's a reasonable risk, and usually it's not a fortune that you're paying to take that. This was highly successful on Kickstarter. I think we took in over 1,300 backers and raised well over $100,000 for that. And that covered our early production costs. It covered our first run. So then we were able to sell this through B&H and other photography sites, as well as Amazon, and a little bit on our own website.
Now,
we kept advancing.
Let me ask you a quick question here. You can't just go to Kickstarter and say, hey, I've got a thing, it's in my brain, help me get a whole bunch of money on that thing. You had to actually have something, and I know from your experience that you have a friend that's good at the metalwork part. So you had to have a prototype in advance, didn't you?
Absolutely. That's a Kickstarter rule. You can't come in with a 3D model or a theoretical book. If you're going to do a book, you need to at least have a chapter that you're starting with and show something from there, and probably a lot more than than that. You need to have a full working prototype. It might not be perfect, but you need to have a prototype to show and demonstrate. And it's not mandatory, but it's practically mandatory. You can't do a good Kickstarter without a good video. So you need a video presentation. If you can do it yourself, that's great. If not, and you're pretty sure of where you're going, hire a professional to do it. You need to do a presentation on the Kickstarter page showing all the details of your product. And before you do any project like this, study other Kickstarter projects and what made them successful to be able to do that. So yes, Larry, the answer to your question is you need a prototype to start with. In our case, we went to the same factory that was producing this, and we asked them to machine us a prototype for the Platypod Max.
You talked a little bit about price, and that you knew that you weren't making a whole lot of money on the original, but you knew you needed to be able to charge more to be able to build the more expensive version with additional features and that little magnetic box that holds the spiked feet that's attached to it. And so you had a lot of things that you needed to charge more for, and then also, therefore, to pay the manufacturer more in order to create it. How do you set pricing on something like that?
Very important question. Before you embark on this, you've got to get a price quote of what your product is going to cost. That's absolutely essential. You've got to know that. You've got to get a good idea, if you're going to sell it yourself, what the costs are going to be to market it and sell it. If you're going to sell it through stores, you've got to speak to them and find out what the margin is going to be. Sometimes you may have to put out a price that's between 2 and 5 times what your actual manufacturing cost is, just so you can make a little profit, or sometimes just to break even. So pricing is very, very important. Talk to friends, talk to professionals, and by all means, get a critic. Get somebody to look at what you're doing. And if someone just says to you, that's a great idea, that's a great product, yeah, go for it, turn away and go to somebody else. You want to be critiqued.
Yeah, I see people do that. They go to their family friend and they say, what do you think? And their family or their brother or their cousin says, oh, that's a great idea. It's a big win for sure. And their family, they already know you. They want to be nice and friendly to you. And you're exactly right. You got to go find those honest critics and ask them for their insight and their opinion. Now, once you get that and you're starting to pull everything together for Kickstarter, I know there's one very important element in describing your product or service or book to the general public on Kickstarter. And that is how you describe it, what kind of media you use, right?
Exactly. And just for a starter, I'll encourage everybody to go to Kickstarter, look up Making Potato Salad by Zach Danger Brown. I think that was his last name. It was a made up name. But this guy went and produced a great Kickstarter campaign about practically nothing. He was offering to make potato salad and send samples of it all around the world. Well, he raised over $50,000 from over 6,000 backers because his presentation was great and the message was great. Realize, on Kickstarter, I would say most projects never reach their goals, and only 0.5% will break $100,000. So you've got to really do your homework and have a great idea. So study what has worked for others and what is successful. Now, we talked about products, Larry, but of course you can do this with a photo book. But to do this, you're going to have to get across, certain ideas.
When it comes to doing all this, Kickstarter is going to be a funding front end. You've got video, you've got prototypes, you've got some good critiques going, you've got your price point set. All that stuff comes together, and then when all this comes together with Platypod, for example, do you have it all shipped to the garage at your house so that you and your kids can put them into boxes and ship them out to the world? How does the delivery, the fulfillment part of things work?
So once you have your manufacturer, and you might be able to have things manufactured here in the States, you may have to go overseas to have it manufactured. You might want to look up sources like Alibaba, or Kickstarter itself will provide names of manufacturers that you can use. So once they ship it in, you've got to get it to what's known as a fulfillment center, a place that will store it in a warehouse. And again, Kickstarter is a great source for this. I found through Kickstarter a fulfillment center that's 1 hour from my home, and I've developed a great relationship with them. So it goes to the fulfillment center, they warehouse and store it, and then when your orders come in through your website, mine is hosted by Shopify, there's Squarespace, there's other websites that can do this. Those orders get billed through companies like Square, like Stripe. The credit cards will get charged. Then the orders go over through something called ShipStation over to the warehouse. The warehouse then takes the orders, picks out the product, packs it up, labels it, ships it out. There are fees all along the way for things like this. Do your homework, find out what all those fees are. But there's a system that can work so that when you've got it all set up right, you don't have to get involved with an order at all. It goes straight from this site to that site to that site to the fulfillment center, out to the customer. All you need to do is be ready to provide really great customer service. So if there's a problem, a question, an issue, your customers can get in touch with you, whether by email or by telephone, a voicemail that you might have set up, and you want to get back within a day or two to a customer that's quite acceptable and give great service.
Larry T., you pulled together this overview of Kickstarter, and you're doing this as a trainer. So you're kind of hitting on the points that help the student understand Kickstarter and understand where they should be with Kickstarter. But you also pulled together, and I know this because we talked about it before we went live, you've got like a series of almost self-tests, ways that individuals considering Kickstarter for what their project is might be able to kind of self-analyze. So in addition to getting that honest critic feedback, what other kinds of tools can people use? Are there ways that people can look at their product or service or book or invention in order to help them better self-analyze?
So I'll refer people also to Rick Salmon's book on making money while you're sleeping, because that will go over a lot of this. But very simply, you have to demonstrate that your product or your book shows you how to do more with less. You have to show the problem solved in a very simple and clear language, and show people, here's your problem, here's how we solved it. You have to say, hey, I looked at what was out there and I couldn't find it. Or there was a book or topic that really nobody else covered very well, and now you can uniquely cover that topic. And with books, what makes your book different? What makes your project different? What can people learn? What can people gain? If they really will learn something, and you can demonstrate that in your video presentation, things that will make their photography, for example, better, you will have a much better sale. And celebrity endorsements help. Very, very important. If you can get this out and get people who are known in the field on there to endorse you right on your Kickstarter page, that would be very, very helpful to give you validity. And then finally, the big why. Explain to people, why do you need this? What's the value proposition? Why should they give you money to be able to complete your project? And that's really about it.
Fantastic. Dr. T, we've gone over by a little over a half a minute, but I have 4 questions lined up, and I would like to pass those on to you.
Let's go to the questions.
All righty. So really quickly, and I think this first one was answered. It came through, then you answered it, but I'll make sure that Ariel gets the nod. For Platypod, the discount code we were given doesn't work for Platyball. Is that correct?
That is correct. Sign up for our newsletter. Right now, Platyball is in rather limited supply. I can't really offer much on discounts on that, but in the future it may be. So if you're signed up for the newsletter, you'll hear about things as they come up. So I would encourage everybody, please get to the website and sign up for the newsletter now. Next edition's again coming out Friday. Yes, Larry.
Very good. Is the Platypod Elbow available now? There's somebody looking for it and they can't find it on the website.
Go to Shop All Products, scroll down. It should be there. I'll double check it right after the show.
If it's not there, it's going to be darn quick.
Guys, $29. You're going to use this. You might want a few of them. It's a great, great deal for this elbow. And again, one knob controls everything on here. You can rotate the collar. You can turn everybody needs one of these.
Dr. T, and I know you've addressed this in other broadcasts, is there a place that you can recommend in order to get extra replacement black spike covers for the ball head screw built into the Platypod? They are very easy to lose track of.
Okay, so the little spike covers, this is what you're referring to. They are available on our website and at B&H for about $5 for a set of 4. So yes, you can purchase those there. And if you want to cover the other end, look in your hardware store for 1/4 inch cap nuts. Okay, and that's little steel nuts that also, if you want to cover the sharp tip of the spike, you can do it with those as well.
Very good. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with one from, I don't know who it's from. What is the Platypod on Dave's pick? Oh, this is from Holly Elmore. What is the Platypod on Dave's pick? So I'm guessing back from the slideshow, and I'm going to scroll back through there if I can find it to see what Platypod Dave has.
I think it was a Platypod Extreme.
I think it was too.
Well, the Max has been discontinued on our website, so Extreme is taking its place now. Mostly because the Extreme is just so convenient now to deploy the spikes. You could just turn these little hinges. Saves you about a minute and a half or 2 minutes whenever you're using them. It's so quick.
Very good. Dr. T, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. Thank you for all the insights on Kickstarter. I mean, people really want to learn how to make money with photography, but then also what are some of the tools? And I know during the daytime classes we've learned about, and even tonight during Dr. T's presentation, we've learned about websites that you can go to add your photography to a fine art website in order to be able to sell those images, to be able to sell prints of what it is that you have. We learned about Lizzie Gadd and how she's making money with self-portraiture in the form of artwork and how she pulled all that stuff together. And then, of course, we learned an awful lot about Kickstarter and how to leverage some of the tools that Kickstarter has available, best practices. I don't think anybody that was thinking about Kickstarter will now then go to Kickstarter and be surprised by something. I think you kind of covered a lot of those bases that allow people to fully understand what to expect when they go to Kickstarter and those best practices. Dr. T, thank you so much, and thank you Platypod for sponsoring this hour and giving us these insights and behind-the-scenes information.
And thank you again to KelbyOne and to all of my friends at Platypod who help us tremendously, to my wife Minna, to Shiv Verma, to Skip Cohen, Hilmar Smith, and Erica, who does our artwork, to all of you who really make this organization work. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Dr. T. Everybody, thank you so much for sticking with us this evening. Make sure you swing by the digital show floor because that's still going on even though the classes have wrapped up now. And we'll see you again tomorrow in some of those breakout sessions or at Track A and Track B that start at 11 o'clock Eastern. Thanks for hanging around.